Jesus freak here. So this morning I was thinking, and I'm like, when a lot of people resort to crime, I could think of four fundamental reasons why someone might do that. Two are internal, and two are external. First, I'll get into the internal reasons. The first is that they're sociopaths. They have faulty brain wiring, and they can't comprehend that anything outside of I, me, mine they think that what gratifies them is the important thing. And the mental capacity for feelings like empathy or remorse just not there. The second is that, again, because they're wired up wrong, they get a high out of doing crime. So both of these cases, the problem is internal. The problem is the person. Then there's two other causes, which I say are external. The first cause here is desperation. This is when a person's situation is so dire that in their desperation they believe there's no other option for survival than to do something unkosher. You could say this is the Les Miserables approach. And the other is rejection. When everyone around a person just treats the person so terribly and shuts them out, shuns them, rejects them. This is summed up by the saying, the village that does not embrace the child will burn to the ground to feel its warmth. Now, I'm not going to say that these external factors remove a person's culpability, but I don't think, for example, it's fair to treat a person who's driven to that manner of action the same as someone who's wired to it. And additionally, why should anyone be driven to that anyway? Why should that be the case for anyone? Why should anyone be so desperate that they have to steal to put food on the plate? That they'd have to burglarize to put a roof over their head? I'm not talking about people who do it when they have some other option and it's less extreme, or that, you know, when someone is rejected to the point that they have no choice but to resort to extreme measures to survive. Why does this happen? Now, I'm going to point out something on my end. I was the black sheep of my family. And I spent years of my life being told, shut up, get lost, go F off, you know. And if they could have done even less for me without ending up in jail, they probably would have. I think the only reason they let me go to public school was because social services said, look, you want to keep custody, you're going to have to send this kid to school. And even afterwards, I felt a lot of, you're on your own now, kid. It's like, yeah, we have to do this. We don't really want to. And if we could do less, we would. Kind of attitude that I got from a lot of caregivers growing up. Now, I didn't go so far as that. I almost did. The worst I did was once I lashed out at someone and I started throttling them because, I just had enough. And, it's trauma. And trauma can mess you up. I tend to be the type who says, we shouldn't allow people to get into situations where they feel like they have to do this, where they're so rejected or isolated or desperate that they resort to these things. But it's the world we live in. So when someone like me is like, I'm advocating for a strong social safety net, and people like, it's easy to spend other people's money. Should we really want to be that selfish that we shut out the rest of the world? We shut out people who need our help? Just because to us it's all about I, me, mine? When you're saying, the government shouldn't take care of it, then who's going to take care of it? Everyone that takes care of it, you're like, I don't care. Not my problem. Not necessarily you, but that's the attitude I see from people. I feel like, what is loving thy neighbor as thyself? If you'd rather let your neighbor with less, rather leave them to rot than to help them when they need it because it's inconvenient. Now, I get it. A lot of us are barely getting by as it is, even without being in situations like I've been in. But that's why we talk about social safety nets and stuff like that. To spread it out, spread the cost out so that it's not, everyone has to pay a whole bunch of money just to support one person or two people or whatever. The idea was that we're all in this together. But I think at play here is a difference in mentality. Between one part of the world where we see humanity as a global village and America, where we tend to see humanity as a bunch of individuals. And this mindset where I'm like, I got mine, forget you, leads to the fact that we could have a lot less suffering, but we choose to let people suffer because we don't give a damn. I got mine. And it's those of us who don't have, who seem to be doing more than those who do. But it really is, we don't give a damn about anyone else. It's the same sociopathy I talked about on a cultural level. This is the same sociopathy that fuels stuff like the new thought, health and wealth, name it and claim it, blab it and grab it. And why we see people as, just, we don't care. And it's funny that people who call themselves Christian, I'm not talking necessarily, people who watch my channel. There's this one guy, I believe he was an editor or something for Christianity Today, and he's like, I'm paraphrasing it. I've had a lot of people be like, the pastors are reading to them from the Sermon on the Mount, turn the other cheek, give to everyone who asks of you from him who borrows from you, do not ask it back. stuff like that. And they're like, what the hell is this woke garbage? And the pastor's like, it's Jesus. Well, we can't, that was another time. We can't do that now. So, not you. Why are you Christians then? If you're willing to throw out everything Jesus said, because it don't work in this day and age. Why you even bother to call yourself a Christian if you're opposed to everything Jesus taught, everything that's in the New Testament? And I've noticed this too. There's too much of a focus on, the Old Testament. We look at that Paula White video that's been making the rounds. Yes, I know it's deceptively edited. That doesn't change the point of what's in it. It's all Old Testament, Old Testament, Old Testament, Where's the Jesus? People want that God of vengeance, justice. They don't want the God of compassion, mercy. Honestly, if you looked in the Old Testament, you'd find that too. What's it, Micah 6? What does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God? But you take the Old Testament, the vindictive, God over a chosen country. You substitute Israel with the United States. And you ignore the rest of the Bible. But even in the Old Testament law, it was talking about taking care of the less fortunate. Oh, taxation is theft. The Old Testament had an income tax. Paul tells people to pay your tax in Romans 13. Jesus paid tax. But you're all about I, me, mine. Again, not you. Is it any wonder that people feel so desperate that they have to resort to extreme measures? Why do we have to have that? There's a saying, there's enough for the want of the poor, but there's not enough for the wants of the rich. It seems to be the world we're living in. Too many of us think we're rich. But we're poor, blind, and wretched. Not just material, but in every other way. I guess some of us see society as kind of like an insurance. You split the responsibility among everyone. And then when stuff happens, it doesn't cost the person who needs it as much. Maybe that's a better mindset to have than I, me, mine. We're all in this together. Maybe we should act like it. Jesus, freak out.